Hello, I'm Joe Walensky from Blink, and I'm having a conversation with Steven Hoober. We'll talk a little bit about his involvement with the upcoming ConveyUX conference. Hi, Steven, how are you?
Terrific. How are you today?
All right, where are you talking to us from?
I'm in Mission, Kansas, which probably doesn't mean anything to anybody. It's just an old suburb of Kansas City, so we're almost walking distance from the city down here.
All right, great. Well, for those of you that may not be familiar with Steven, he's been involved with mobile design for a very long time. He wrote the book Designing Mobile Interfaces. He's a contributor to UX Magazine. In fact, was just reading one of his posts the other day. He has his own company, Fourth Mobile, and he's going to be doing a couple of sessions at ConveyUX. And so we're going to talk with them a little bit about those. So let's see. First of all, your longer session is a 90-minute workshop on tools for mobile UX design. So what can people expect to see and learn from that?
Well, first, a lot of griping about the current state of things, and based on my actual experiences, I often talk up the way that we're all very interface centric, that we're big on building comps in Photoshop since fireworks got killed now, and things like other things like that. And I developed a lot of my opinions and experiences, which mesh nicely with other people's too. I just happen to be one of the few people out in the wilderness yelling about it, based on some stuff I did years ago, where I spent something like 6 months of 16-hour days in a room drawing things in bits of paper and photoshopping with stuff. And I'd hoped we'd pass that, but it turns out a client I'm working on now, we're stuck in that same comp-centric world, and we're running into the same problems we always had. And you pay attention to that. Nobody thinks about interactions, nobody thinks about architectures, and nobody thinks about systems when you do that stuff. Mobile stuff, especially, is very good at being connected to data sources, being aware of the environment, being about the user and their data. So if you start drawing pretty screens, you'll end up with a very pretty but possibly useless product, or one that never actually gets launched, as you notice you missed huge important features of it. So when I talk about process, after I get done with the griping about the various bad ways you're doing stuff, I get to the solutions, and a lot of them are already things we're used to. You use the existing processes you learned in the school or read about in the books. You make sure to do your information architecture stage. You carry whiteboard markers with you so you never have an excuse to not draw on the whiteboard, or use post-it note exercises. And you do a lot of stuff having to do with that's mobile specific. You think about scale, so never put your designs up on, if you can avoid it, up on the screen in PowerPoint to review, because a handset design or a tablet design is not 4 feet wide, and it's not viewed from 10 feet away. You need to put it in people's hands, and it's not that hard to do that, whether you're printing it or sticking it on their phone or passing one around. You need to think about interactions, which makes it very hard to do stuff like just put it into Photoshop, or in some ways even demonstrate it in low fidelity prototyping tools. There's a long discussion about what the best way to do that is, but one way or the other, you have to think about, specify, and make sure that it gets built right, how things transition from one screen to another, and what the overall path is.
I know
And
you showed me the that wooden frame that you have. Is that something that you use to pass around?
yeah, so sometimes, here, I'll turn away from you for a moment. Yeah, I have a whole bunch, for example, I have a whole bunch of phones. We'll grab a few of them real quickly here. Like, just within arm's reach, I have all these devices, and there's a whole pile of other ones. And yeah, one I was showing you earlier is for sketching more, is this little wooden phone that you can put bits of paper into. Here I've done it with printouts, but one of the things you can do with this is, and you don't have to have woodworking skills, you can just get some tape and bits of, as long as you don't mind taping things to your phone, and that helps you remember to design at device scale. You do your sketching not on big pieces of paper, not on whiteboards, but you draw on phone-sized interfaces, so you remember about touch and reach and so forth, which gets to my other topic, of course, too.
And your other topic at the conference, how people really hold in touch.
Right, which was really interesting. I hope I'm quoting right. If not, edit me out. Josh Clark did some really clever stuff about the touch ranges, which we're still seeing referenced with the little red, yellow, green zones based on how far your thumb moves around, which seemed very clever and good, and I believed in a lot of ways. But I ran across some. I started trying to use it and correlate it to what I knew otherwise, and ran into some issues. Looked at some research and found some things that weren't quite right, and then found a dead end where we just don't have the knowledge. We're surmising, we're guessing, and we're using our own personal biases and behaviors too much. So a lot of my thoughts in this have been based on going out and doing my own research, sometimes meta research, reviewing existing work, but one of them was watching well over 1,000 people on the streets of various cities as I traveled, actually carrying their phones around and tapping them. And I published that data, and we were able to come up with some really interesting ways that we can use that to think about how people actually do use their devices. I'm also about to do hoping to do another research project. We're working on it pretty much right now. This morning, had phone calls with people about arranging it so we can expand that into tablets. So, which is something even less understood, is how do people actually hold on to tablets? What do they do with them? Where do they click? What's easy and so forth. So we're coming up with a method that we don't have to just guess. We don't have to do something as simple as say, make sure your touch targets aren't too close together. Make sure people, the old school, do you have enough contrast? The type is readable, very basic guidelines to maybe getting to a world where we can design particular interfaces, particular widgets and components based on the needs corresponding to the location of the screen and how we expect people to actually work with them.
All right, great. Well, thanks for taking this time to give us an overview, and I'll look forward to seeing you in Seattle in February.
Great, thanks. Can't wait to talk for a lot longer on all these topics and show you pretty pictures and wave my arms even more about this.
All right, thanks, Steven.